Learn about a true love of animals and how deep it runs in one woman's life. Coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Myrtle Beach Herald at Myrtle Square Mall. We're focused on the Humane Society of North Myrtle Beach. And we're visiting with Cathy Honeycutt, the local sales manager at WFXB Fox 43. Good morning, Cathy.
Good morning.
How exciting. This is strange kind of having you in here, obviously here at the Herald, and knowing you've been with the Fox 43 family for a little more than a year and a half now.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. And to get you back to the Carolinas,
Yes.
Cathy.
I'm very excited about coming home.
It was so great reading. It's something you prepared for the Humane Society of North Myrtle Beach. It was exciting talk, obviously, of your experience with cats and with dogs and horses, as well as probably other animals that you didn't even cover.
I grew up being an animal lover. I was raised in Atlanta, but my real love was going to my grandmother's house, where we had the goats and we had the cows and we had the horses and dogs and cats and rabbits and everything else. So that was my love. I would go down there and I could live there forever. And
this was a very early age. You remember, can you gauge like what age you would have been when you first can remember being out there?
There are pictures of me being out there at 6 months old.
No.
Yeah, my grandmother used to punish me by making me sit in the house and do crossword puzzles or sewing and learning how to tat or whatever. And my brother, who loved to sit inside, she would punish him by going up, making him go outside. So when she was very angry at me, she would take my saddle and bridle away, and then I would just go into the apple tree, get the horse to come over, drop a few apples, and I'd ride bareback without a saddle or bridle, and she would come out yelling at me. So yeah, it's a long and trusted love with the animals.
That's amazing. And your parents were in that as well. I mean, they understood your love there.
Yeah.
Right. And supported it.
Yeah, and they let me have the dog and the rabbit at the house, but it was difficult inside the city to really have what you wanted to have.
Now, is the farm still there?
No, unfortunately, my grandmother died about 5 or 6 years ago, and we dispersed the farm with the other grandchildren and children that are left. So, but one day maybe I'll have my own farm.
Yeah, Cathy, let's hope so. Now, was it just you and your brother growing up, or did you have other brothers and sisters?
I have my brother. I have a sister that's 14 years younger than I am, and then I have a stepbrother that's 21 years younger than I am.
Wow.
But basically, it was just my brother and I growing up.
And now, does he never really got into that love of animals?
No, he's completely different from me. He's a computer programmer in Columbia, South Carolina, and he's been all over the nation doing that sort of thing. He really likes the details of the computers. The animals, he can see them or leave them alone. It was just totally me.
Right. College brought you to the Carolinas in the first place, Cathy. Do you still get back to Atlanta at all? Any family still in that area?
I went back for Thanksgiving. I go and see them then. But Atlanta, I don't like the traffic. I don't like the congestion. And when I left Atlanta to go to college in North Carolina, I just never went back. It was a great experience. I went to Wingate for 2 years, then transferred to Catawba and Salisbury for 2 years. And it was just a wonderful world for me. And I came to love North Carolina and didn't leave the Carolinas except for 3 years that I went to Texas and then came back to Myrtle Beach.
What was that like being in school there in Salisbury? Of course, being in Wingate originally, so both times in North Carolina. What was Catawba like?
Catawba is a Christian school that is just phenomenal. Everybody's pretty much on your own as to how you set up your structure. It may not be so now, but it was then that sort of education. It wasn't a strict Christian school like Wingate was. It was Baptist, but it was a very eclectic liberal arts college, and it still is. It still has about the same enrollment as it did when I left, and that's right around 2000.
Is that right? It's been around for a good while, then.
It's been around for over 150 years.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
And it's in Salisbury.
In Salisbury.
Huh.
Yes.
Did you stay in the Salisbury area after? And what did you study there, Cathy?
I studied speech and drama, and that's what my degree is in, and with a minor in art. I had when I went to Wingate, I went on a full ride for an art scholarship.
Who's that?
And then went to Salisbury, supposedly on an art scholarship, but they dissolved the department. So we changed over to speech and drama and picked up into the speech and drama department and was back on a full scholarship within 6 months.
This has got to be a side of you that I don't know, Cathy. How does one get an art scholarship? I mean, do you have to be capable of, I mean, what is that exactly?
When I was in high school, I had a teacher who was Lamar Dodd's daughter from the University of Georgia. And she sent me to governor's school. She sent me to several other different associations in Georgia that got me extremely interested in art. And I'm very proficient in the pen and ink and also watercolors. It's something I do now to enjoy myself, to relax myself. Also photography. So I like being not in the center of the world, but out the edge of the world, which is why I live out across on the intercoastal, out in the country at the present.
Right, kind of in the middle of nowhere, but it started to pop up around you a little bit.
Yeah, and when people come to my house, they're amazed at the different pieces of art that I've got all through the house. I have collected from everywhere that I've been, all over the United States and Europe, different pieces of art that's my love. Some people buy stocks and bonds. I buy pieces of art.
And Cathy, now how much of that would be stuff you've collected as opposed to stuff you've painted or drawn yourself?
It's about 50-50.
Really?
So, yeah, a lot of people don't know my pieces in the house until they look at the signature and they go, "Oh, did you do this?" And they went, "Yeah, I did that, either in college or in my early life."
Right.
The reality is, I realized very early I worked in a radio station to help pay for all the expenses of going through college. So I realized very early the art and the speech and the drama is great, but to make a living I had to do something else. So I went into radio, TV, and then into sales.
And you even dabbled a little bit in cable sales, I believe.
Yes.
So you've covered a lot of bases there, Cathy. Well, now coming out of school, you made that a pretty quick decision that you needed to get. I mean, you were working in. You said a radio station. Was it there in Salisbury?
Yeah, I started working in a radio station in Salisbury. I did the Sunday afternoon shift, and we covered a lot of NASCAR, and it was a lot of satellite feeds. And typically, with an AM/FM station back in those days, you were only supposed to work 6 to 8 hours, but the night guy may not show up, so you had to work 8 or 10, 12 hours and then sign the station off at some point in time.
Wow.
And from there, I went to work for Assistant Stan Kaplan at a station in Charlotte doing news and doing some of the traffic reporting. And from there, I went to be a promotions director for Ted Turner WRET in Charlotte, which is now an NBC affiliate.
That's right. Yeah, let's talk about what it was like working for Ted Turner. Golly.
He is God. He is just very bright and enthusiastic and has all sorts of ideas, and they're running out of him constantly. And he's very loud. My office was on the second floor, upstairs to the back, and he would come in the building downstairs and I could hear him. But Ted wanted things done Ted's way, and he got them done his way.
Yeah.
He did the begathon when I was there of asking people to send in money, and then we would play the different movies that they requested, and part of my job was to find the movie and then send them a letter as to we were running the movie at that point in time. It was in the early years of his TV world, and he really wasn't that deep in the cash as he is at this present time.
Sure. Now, did he own WTBS at that time?
He had just bought it.
Right.
He had just bought it, and he was running both stations. At that point in time, he was also doing the boating, the yachting, the America's Cup.
Right.
So it was sometimes difficult to find him. That's long before cell phones or fax machines. You had to depend upon a landline to find him and to speak to him.
Now, of course, you point out that he's loud. Was he loud? I mean, just trying to figure out Of course, the call letters of the station were his initials, so he obviously had some focus on himself at some level.
With Ted Turner, when you picked up the phone, you had to hold the phone out considerably just to listen to him, because if you got it any closer, the words were distorted. He was speaking so loud. That's just the way he is. He's bright, carries on a large conversation, and just goes all the time.
That's amazing. So it's not that it was an obnoxious yelling type thing, but it was just he talks very loud.
Well, some people thought it was obnoxious. I just, having been brought up by a father who was a military DI drill instructor, I just let it roll off my back.
Mm-hmm.
It was what it is.
Mm-hmm. So from radio into television, did you get back into radio after WRET?
Yes, I did. I was married to a gentleman who worked for Duke Power at the time. We were transferred every 2 to 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And some of the locations that we were transferred to, there were no television stations, or they were within 30 to 45 minutes of the home. And at that time, I had a very young child and couldn't drive that far to work. So I went to work at a station in Hendersonville, which we were transferred after Greensboro, and started on the air again. And then one day my general manager came in and told me, he said, I really think we need you more in sales than being on the air. So that's when I made the transition.
How exciting. There in Hendersonville.
Uh-huh.
Golly, so that was the first transition into sales. Do you mind me asking what year that was, Cathy?
I believe that was 1980.
Yeah, okay, well, good. So you've been in the selling aspect for more than half your life. I mean, golly, that's fantastic. When did you end up getting back into television?
I was in radio in Charlotte, and we went through several different ownership changes, and we were going to go through another ownership change at one station, and I decided that it was time to maybe try something different. I had a non-compete with the radio station saying I could not work in any radio or television station within the market, but it did not mention cable television, so that's when I went to cable. After being with cable for 2 years, I realized that they weren't selling like the TV stations were selling, and at some point in time they were going to have to. So that's when I moved from cable into television.
When someone says I sell television, well, what exactly does that mean?
You're selling the spots that are airing within the program and the different programs, and the beauty of television is that you have different audiences for every program. And you can reach anybody in the world, from a child 2 years old to a gentleman who's retired at 65, just depending upon which program you pick to view.
And so the big distinction there between television and radio would be a radio is a format, and you're really reaching...
You're locked into a certain audience, whether it's men 18-24 or whether it's women 25-54. That's the audience you're going to reach, and you're going to reach them over and over and over. You're not going to expound outside of that area. But with television, you can reach everyone, and it's really a lot better sell.
That's a very good point. Now, were you able to maintain the love or the activity with animals while you were doing all the traveling with your husband, Duke Power?
Oh, yeah, I just moved them with me and put them in the trailer and go on down the road, find another place for them to be.
So your husband had to be an animal lover as well there, Cathy.
Yeah, people who are around me understand that they've got to be animal lovers or it just doesn't work.
And you mentioned a child that...
Yeah, I have a son. He's 27. He's in real estate here in Myrtle Beach. So we're establishing roots that we plan to be here for a very, very long time.
Yes, golly. Is your son an animal lover?
Oh, yes. Oh, he shares the love of the animals as much as I do. And he helps maintain, he helps get them up, he helps do everything with them.
Yeah, when someone talks about being an animal lover, of course, there are a heck of a lot of folks who either grew up in a setting where they couldn't have, I grew up in an apartment, we couldn't have cats or dogs, and so I never had any interaction with animals. When you're talking to somebody about your love of animals, how do you explain it to someone who has never spent any time around them, is almost scared of them?
Some people are scared of them because they just really don't understand them, or they haven't given them the time, or somewhere in their background as a child, somebody made them afraid of them. You know, that horse will hurt you because it's bigger than they are, that dog will bite you, that cat will scratch you. And that is one thing we've always taught anybody who's been around the house, that our animals love people, they love to be around people, and they just want to enjoy being around you. The dog, the corgi I have a little bit, could also be used as a pet therapy. I got her, she was a show dog, and she wasn't going to work out as a breeding dog. Her hips were too small to do that. So I got her from the breeder and started training her to be basically a therapy dog. And she can go, you can take her to a nursing home, you can take her to children who have handicaps, and she just loves to be held, and she's very happy. And the people, you can see them responding to the dog, in that they are holding something, they're giving love to something that is not inanimate. It's not a teddy bear. It's an animal who is giving love back to them.
Well, that can be very therapeutic, whether it's for children or adults, seniors or any age. That's a powerful thing. Now, of course, we had, I think it was 4 or 5 months ago, strange, we were here at the Herald, and we were focused on a therapeutic ride center, the equestrian side of therapy. Have you ever been involved in that, Kathy?
Oh, yes, I've been involved in that back in Charlotte. I've had horses or been around horses all my life, and I had some show horses, and in fact, one of my show horses, Maggie, is now basically teaching young people how to ride. But what we would do at the barn was we normally did all the show horses and the training of the young people and everything else, but giving back to the community, we would always bring in some youngsters who needed either therapy or needed some way to calm themselves down. And horses are one of the most aerobatic ways of exercising, and what they find is that children who cannot respond to anyone else, who they cannot respond to people, will respond to the constant movement that the horses have, and they can improve their lives by being around the horses.
How fascinating. You know, I remember Meg talking about that and some of the other volunteers from Pegasus, and someone, again, having not been around horses, it's difficult to imagine. As you said, oftentimes there's that impression that horses can be fearful, or you can be fearful of horses because they're so much larger, or you've got an image of a horse kicking with their rear legs.
Well, you choose your horse. You don't put them on just anything. There were some show horses that I would not ride, but there are horses that are very gentle, and they love the interaction with humans just as much as the humans love the interaction with them.
Kathy, can you gauge what it's like for the animals when you travel from one location to another, when you would move, or is it as difficult for them to move as it is for you oftentimes?
Yes, and it's very traumatic on them quite often, and sometimes the new location that you're moving to in either an apartment or whatever will not allow the pets, and so they are placed out of a different area as well as you. The travel is very difficult. The new climate may be difficult. Different things.
So before you make a decision as to where you're going to live, you have to thoroughly think through how it will affect either your cats or dogs.
Well, the trip back from Texas, we had picked up a cat that was a stray in Texas, so therefore I had 3 cats and a dog that I had to transport back. Well, I brought 1 dog and 1 cat with me the first trip coming back from Texas, and when I went to close the house, I got the other 2 cats, and those were the traumatic cats. Those are the ones that I basically had to drug to make sure that they were very peaceful and very calm on the way back. How
amazing to have to go through. I mean, that's a very important point, but surely an aspect that I'm sure a non-animal owner or lover would, and we use the word owner. I mean, you're an animal owner. These are...
they're like my children. They really are. They all have different personalities. And you have to understand something like the base closing, the Air Force Base closed in Myrtle Beach, where all of those people were deployed to other locations. They had a lot of pets, and if they were going overseas, they couldn't take them. So places like the Humane Society, the animal shelters, had to absorb those pets.
Let's go ahead and segue. We've got about 7 minutes into the Humane Society of North Myrtle Beach.
Okay.
They've got some serious activities going on right now. I guess there's the push for the sale of the calendars.
Yes, we're selling calendars at $10 per calendar, and what it does is 100% of the money goes back to the Humane Society of North Myrtle Beach to run the animal shelter there in North Myrtle Beach. We have gotten contributions, we have gotten sponsors that are on the different pages to pay for the calendar, so therefore the money does go back to the animals. What it is it's all the different police officers and firemen in Myrtle Beach, along with the mayor of North Myrtle Beach, Marilyn Hatley, on the calendar with their animals.
With their own animals?
With their own animals. Mayor Hatley is there with her 2 animals, Harley and Davidson.
Oh, come on.
Yes, that's the front cover.
I hadn't asked Marilyn that when we were together. That's hilarious. So there's a heck of a lot of animal lovers that you may not even know about.
Exactly. Plus, the Leadership Grand Strand has adopted the Animal Shelter North Myrtle Beach and the Humane Society of North Myrtle Beach as their project for this year. They hope to raise up to $50,000 to improve the shelter at North Myrtle Beach and make those portable cages or portable shelters, because we will have to move the animal shelter when the Main Street Bridge connector goes through.
Is that right? Okay, I knew I'd seen there was a building fund underway, and of course, how regularly do they put out the newsletter?
We put out the newsletter once a month. Anyone who is a member receives the newsletter.
I think there was one, maybe it was from last year, where the operations director was talking about a phone call that she'd gotten from someone who wanted to adopt a cat, but wasn't familiar with the terms spay and neuter. What are some of the things that, if someone was interested in adopting, would those be terms they would need to know?
They would need to know spay and neuter. It's very important to spay and neuter cats and dogs. Cats propagate or have babies just about as quickly as rabbits. By the time you have 15 to 20 days after a litter is born, that cat may be pregnant again. So before we allow any cats or dogs to leave, we have to spay or neuter. That is to keep the animal control situation from getting out of control. We don't want animals on the street. We don't want animals hit by cars, and one of the ways is to control the animal population.
Well, I saw also in one of the other newsletters there was a gentleman that almost annually is bringing in a litter, and I think there was a concern there. Obviously, they want to do something about it.
Every month, the North Myrtle Beach Humane Society gives out 10 spay or neuter certificates that you can come by and pick up the certificate and get your dog or cat spayed or neutered free. So we were trying to get out there and make sure that that is done.
That's fantastic. Well, that's a great commitment of the Humane Society of North Myrtle Beach. There's humane societies in many communities, aren't there?
Yes, virtually every community has their own humane society. What makes us different is that the city owns the animal shelter, but we run it for them. And we need the money for the different facilities, the food, the different people who work there, vaccinations, medical, whatever that happens at the facility we're responsible for.
I think I saw in reading some materials even about yourself, Cathy, that, for instance, there was an example where you said, my queen talks to me, or queen talks to me. What are some examples of things, again, for people who don't have pets?
Queenie, I adopted her from the ASPCA in Charleston, South Carolina when I lived there. We went to the animal shelter to do a story on Christmas pets. Should you adopt a child or a cat or dog for Christmas? And the seriousness of it, because you don't want to get into January 10th or 15th and find out that this cat or dog does not fit with you, that you really need to do something else with it. Queenie is very vocal. I was walking through the animal shelter and already had a dog and a cat at home, and she was talking to me the whole time, chipped out of her cage. So I opened up the cage and started walking through the animal shelter with her. And as the cats went by and were snarling or whatever at her, she was just purring right along and talking to me and telling me everything about herself, just around, just talking around. We go into the dog pen, and she's just the same. She's really relaxed. But she constantly talks to you. She is the princess of the house. She's a tuxedo black Persian cat, and she's just a joy. But unfortunately, somebody had to let her go, and fortunately, she found my home.
Yes. And your other cat, what's her name? Or is it a male or female?
I have two
boy, girl.
Yeah, everybody's been adopted one way or another. May was adopted from a garage. There was a litter of cats, and they were going to put them in a bag and throw them in the river, quite honestly, and I brought her home. Jack was thrown out of a car in the neighborhood that I lived at in Texas and came walking up to me when I was walking through the neighborhood. Tried to find the family, but never did. May is probably 9 or 10 years old and a gray calico. Jack is a gray cat, but unfortunately Jack has cancer, so we're trying to maintain him on different medication. I don't know how much longer I'll have Jack.
Now, you mentioned you've got a couple of dogs as well. Could you just explain those?
I've got Little Bit. She's a corgi. She's the one that came from the breeder.
Right.
And then I've got a Jack Russell called Gracie. Gracie came from the Jack Russell rescue units. She was being abused by a family, and they notified me that they had a Jack Russell that would be very willing to be adopted, but it had to be a special home.
Right. Has your son Scott gotten into, I mean, obviously you mentioned he has a love as well. Does he have any of his own, or does...
He favors the Corgi and he favors the Tomcat Jack very much, and you can tell that they tend to merge more towards him than towards me.
Let's talk real quick. Any other things as it relates to the Humane Society of North Myrtle Beach that a viewer could possibly get involved in if they've never owned an animal? What are some of the things that they would really want to do just to get involved?
Come by the Humane Society. If you want to adopt a cat or a dog, the best thing to do is to try to come out there and talk, have playtime with the animal and see what it does with you and with your children. It's very important. If you may want, even if you have other cats or dogs at home, you may want to bring them in to see how they're going to interact with these other animals. You can come to the Humane Society and just walk the dogs. They constantly need somebody just to walk them around the block, and we'd love for you to do it. We need people to help feed the animals. We need people to give them baths. We need people to run them to the vets. We need a lot of assistance. Anything and everything is. We're very thankful for everything.
And for a child, for a parent who has a child or a grandparent who has a child who's potentially fearful of even cats or dogs,
they can come to the Humane Society and just play with the animals and see and grow into an adoption situation. A child who's fearful of the dogs or cats, you talk to the people at the Humane Society and they know which animal will probably be very helpful in bringing that child out, and they'll bring them into the room and let you play with them.
And if there was any message you wanted to send to somebody as it relates to your love of animals, Cathy, what would be the most important aspect of that love?
Animals are basically people to me that are wearing fur coats. They have emotions, they have personalities, they can help you in different ways. They are basic true love without being a human.
You heard her say it. It's so exciting to think about the Humane Society, whether it's a Humane Society in Laurinburg or Hartsville or in your hometown of North Myrtle Beach. There's Humane Societies that make a difference. Get out there, experience animals. They may become yours. Cathy, thanks so much for being with us this morning. Stay tuned to more Carolina People coming up next. We want to thank Cathy Honeycutt and all the volunteers and staff of the Humane Society of North Myrtle Beach for making today's Carolina People so special.